We're here to help you navigate your business growth with strategic conversations and insights from experts in multiple industries. Welcome to Wayfinding Growth.
This episode is brought to you by Impulse Creative's Video Marketing Masterclass. George B. Thomas built out an 11-module on-demand course on how to leverage video in your business at impulsecreative.com/VFM for Video Masterclass. Welcome to the show. I'm Dan Moyle.
And I'm Remington Begg. We're so glad that you're here. On today's episode, we're talking with the co-founder of Tettra, Nelson Joyce. So Dan, what did you love most about this episode?
Man, first of all, I just loved getting to know Nelson. Like, he was just what a chill guy. So nice to open up. But I took some notes here on my trusty notebook, and one of the things that he said that hit me really hard was not just for business but for life, that you got to keep your emotions kind of in check, so to speak. It's the swings that kill you, he said, and that hit me hard. Not too high, not too low. So that was great. And then the other thing was, Tettra is a tool that helps you document everything. And you asked him, I think it was, why start early if you're a small company? He was like, well, start documenting early to build habits. And then he talked about how he uses it and why. And that was a great takeaway too. I'm curious though about you, because we always have different perspectives. So I want to know, what did you take away from this one?
So for a long time, I've been looking for almost like that anti-startup, as you actually coined it in the message. But I loved how he talked about taking VC money actually increases your risk. It doesn't lower it. And I think a lot of times companies think that by taking money, they can lower their risk to achieve that status. Mm-hmm. So I really loved his insights in that. And then as a founder and or co-founder, also realizing that you have to make sure you don't flame out and take people with you if things go bad. So there's like a real fundamental responsibility there. And he very eloquently talked about that. I loved how transparent he was. I can't wait for everyone to listen to this episode.
Yeah. Transparent was great. He was, just full of insight. So I'm excited. Great episode. Thanks for putting this together. Friends, get ready for season 2, episode 4 with Nelson Joyce and how Tettra has grown. So season 2, episode 4, Nelson Joyce from Tettra. Welcome to Wayfinding Growth, my friend.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
I'm stoked. I love Tettra. Nelson and I go way back. Not really too far back, but we go way back.
Remington's always been willing to try our very early versions of all our products, so I appreciate that.
Of course.
He is a beta testing aficionado, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
Excellent. So go ahead, Remington.
Take a second just to tell people what Tettra is, because I think that as we start to go into today's conversation, we might start hearing a couple of things. So you mind giving that a couple breaths of an intro to Tettra and what you do there?
Yeah. So Tettra is an internal wiki tool that's built for companies to help them basically document all of their processes and information so that they can grow more efficiently. So it helps with answering repetitive questions that people have. It also helps you onboard people more quickly because all that information that's trapped in your coworkers' heads is actually written down in a centralized place. So you can just go find the information instead of trying to ask 15 people over Slack, what the Wi-Fi password is or something. So it's just a system to get all that trapped knowledge out of your head into a centralized place so your teammates basically can find it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
And that's huge. I mean, communication obviously is critical, especially in this world of remote employees, distributed teams, whatever you want to call it. But even internally, having that tool, I liked what you said, Nelson, was an internal wiki communication thing. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think what happened, one thing we noticed is when Slack got really popular and started to spread, people kind of were like, wow, this is great. What other things can we use that can help us in this way to communicate better? So it kind of caused this cascade effect where people kind of rethought the way they were using software to kind of help them operate better. And we kind of have been riding that wave, which has been great. And Slack just went public a couple weeks ago. It's doing really well. So I credit a lot to what we were able to do to what Slack helped bring into the world, which has been really awesome.
Right on. That's cool. So I want to dive in a little bit to what we like to call charting the course as we're talking about finding the growth and everything and having your wayfinding points. I noticed in your background, Nelson, you were at HubSpot with what was called a product entrepreneur.
Yep.
That was pretty intriguing to me. Like, wait a minute, what's a product entrepreneur? So can you take us back to that and what that means?
Yeah. So I guess full transparency, we just made that title up ourselves.
Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. I mean, reason being they being like our bosses really didn't know how to categorize us. So they kind of said, well, what are you? And product entrepreneur was what we came up with. And the reason why we needed separate titles is because we were operating outside of the normal product systems. So we had our own team that was building a completely different product, separate from the normal HubSpot product. It was called Lead-In, which is what Remington had used, I think, back in the day. Yeah. So we, David Cancel was our boss at the time. Me and my current co-founder, Andy, worked on this together at HubSpot. So when we started working together, David sat us down, said, okay, you guys are working on this new project. It needs to be free or cheap, probably, maybe. It should be for like smaller companies who can't afford the full HubSpot, and you should use orange in the logo. And that was the only input he gave us. And he said, just go build something. Like, I don't even care what it is really, as long as it follows those general guidelines.
Awesome.
So that's kind of why we were operating in this like different world,
Yeah. So is that product entrepreneur inside of a company? Is that what helped fuel your entrepreneurial journey into Tettra then?
Yeah. I mean, it was basically a dress rehearsal for actually starting a company. Andy and I knew we wanted to work together on a company someday, and we kind of used the Lead-In thing inside of HubSpot as like I said, the dress rehearsal. Because one of the biggest risks you take in starting a company is, can you even work with the person or the people that you're starting it with, right? So we wanted to eliminate one of those massive risks, like right out of the gate, and just kind of practice running a company together, basically.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, that worked out. And Lead-In's now like a core part of the product in HubSpot. So you guys must have hit the ground running the right way.
Yeah, I mean, we took it from 0 to like 15, 20,000 businesses using it. And we got it to a point where HubSpot basically couldn't kill it. So we knew our legacy was cemented at that point. So then we could move on and do other things.
Amazing.
That's funny. That's awesome. So if that was one of your plans, was to make sure that you could work with someone, what's something that within Tettra at this point maybe isn't quite as happy ending? What's one of your shipwrecks where you've had to learn a lesson?
Yeah, I mean, we've had plenty. We've had a lot. And we have always kind of shared them openly, which is, been hard, but I'm glad we've done it, because it makes us, admit that we're human and that starting a business is hard.
Absolutely.
Right. And almost every great business almost dies at least once, probably more than once. Right. So, I mean, for us, a big shipwreck was almost running out of money and having to lay a few people off. That was pretty bad.
It has to be hard.
Yeah. I mean, what happened was we basically couldn't raise more money. And really the reason why we couldn't raise more money is because we really didn't want to. So it was this thing we needed to do to keep all the employees and keep running the company the way we were running it, but our heart really wasn't in it, So when we went out and tried to raise money, we basically couldn't get it done because I think investors could tell that our heart really wasn't in it. And so that caused us to get pretty close to running out of money, but we ended up, like I said, had to lay some people off, cut salaries a little bit, but we, bounced off the ground and kept going. And now we're, it forced us to rethink how we were running the company, I think, and kind of admit to ourselves that we weren't a hyper growth, venture-backed company, and we could and we wanted to run the company in a more sustainable, realistic way, right? And that, like, it was super painful, and wouldn't want to go through it again, but it actually helped us kind of solidify what our beliefs were and how we wanted to run the company. So it ended up actually being, and it ended up being good because we were able to kind of make those changes we needed to make.
That really sounds like a defining moment then. I mean, that's,
Yep.
one of those things. And, Impulse, we had a very similar, like, feeling like you're bouncing off the pavement. That's like
Yep.
the perfect way to explain it. And the faster you're trying to go up, a lot of times the harder you're going to crash if you're not doing it the right way. And so I really love that you kind of brought that up. But it sounds like it's defined. I follow you guys on Twitter like crazy. You're super open about just about everything in your company. And I think that's really huge. But talk to me about your heart not really being in getting funding, because you don't hear that a lot with SaaS. But I'm incredibly intrigued.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can build a company. There's not a right or a wrong way to do it, right? It's just trade-offs. So we saw firsthand, like, the good side of hypergrowth, and, like, for the most part, the good side of running a hypergrowth company inside of HubSpot, right?
Yep.
But those stories are like, that's the exception to the rule, basically, because 8 out of every 10 of those companies is going to flame out and basically either, burn out its employees, create toxic culture, or it's going to, it's just going to be a bad situation in majority of cases, right? And that math works fine for VC, because at any given time, they're probably invested in 10, 20 companies, right? So if 80% of them fail, that's fine for them, which is how their business model works. But for me as an entrepreneur, I have one chance, right? So why would I use my one chance on something that has an 80% chance of failure, or more, probably more, 90% chance of failure, right? So, Andy and I, like I said, we saw that method works fine in a lot of cases, but we were not willing to make the trade-offs to go that route, right? Because the trade-offs basically are, you give up control of the company, right? You basically invite third parties to have control of your company, right? In the form of investors and, like, a board, outside investors. And then the other thing you give up is optionality, right? So you have to build a $1 billion company or you fail, right? And there's a lot of different options that my company right now could go through that is not a $1 billion exit, but that would still be a wild success, right?
Sure.
And we didn't want to eliminate all of those options and then just pigeonhole ourselves into one option, right?
Yeah.
And what will happen is, because you've basically agreed to that one option or nothing, the people who you basically invite into your company as co-owners will force you to do that. And you're basically contractually obligated to go for that 1 in 100 shot, or, so
that's a lot of risk.
Yeah. It's funny that people actually, like, I think the common wisdom is that raising money is like a risk decreasing activity, because it like increases your runway, but it actually increases your risk by a lot, because you are removing all that optionality. So, like, we saw that path, we knew it, our eyes are open, basically. Like, we've been around the VC game for a while. We understand how that stuff works, and we know a lot of people want to do it, and that's fine. But we just weren't willing to trade off the things we needed to trade off in order to go down that path.
Great insight. I think that's fantastic. So you talked about the shipwreck. So what about a proudest moment that you can share with people, like, in what it did teach you?
Yeah, I would say a proud moment for me was we were having a product team meeting a few weeks ago, and everyone just we were just doing like a post-mortem like at the end of a month, or like a retro at the end of a month, and everyone was just kind of like, this place is awesome. Like, I love working on this team. Like, this group of people is, like, so awesome. And that was really, I was proud of that. It felt good.
Spoken like a true co-founder. I love it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And how do you keep that culture going? Like, what is your and Andy's view of the future, saying, okay, right now they love it and everything's great. How do we keep that going?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know because I've never done it.
Love it.
That's fair. That's fair.
I have some guesses and I have some theories about how we can do it. And I think our theory on it is that if you don't have to grow super, super fast and hire 50 people a month, which at points during our HubSpot career, HubSpot was hiring 50 people a month, right? If not more, probably more now, but at that point it was crazy. But I think growing slowly actually is a superpower because people can kind of, get used to the new system and the system kind of scales naturally without breaking, right? So analogy Andy, my co-founder, uses a lot is going the VC backed route or raising a lot of money, hiring really fast is the equivalent of like taking steroids to get ultra strong, super fast, right? Like you get strong, you're able to do it, but as soon as you stop taking the steroids, you basically have all these health problems, your body deteriorates, right? But building the type of company we're building is like actually just lifting weights a lot. In a natural way without taking every day. Yeah. Being in the gym 5 days a week, right. And doing squats and deadlifts, like that's the equivalent. Right. So, and like you grow more slowly, but it's a more sustainable growth. So like that, so growing slowly. And I think the way we operate is pretty smart because we use our product so much. So like everything we do has to be documented and explained. Right? Nothing can be like decisions can't be made in like some back room with no input from everyone.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just being open. Like we're also as much as we share externally, we share even more internally. Right. So like, for example, we have transparent salaries. So everyone knows what everyone else makes. Everyone knows how much equity everyone else has. We try to be really open about product decisions, about company decisions, about how you get promoted, how you get more equity, how you get new titles. And we're kind of building that stuff out slowly over time. And a lot like the common startup wisdom, all startup wisdom is shaded by the fact that it's expecting you to be a VC-backed super growth company. But a lot of the startup, and so because of that, a lot of the startup wisdom is that process is evil. Right? Operational process is evil and it will slow you down and it will kill your company. But if you don't have to grow that fast, you can actually be thoughtful about processes, about why you're doing the things you're doing. Like if you're not going to be out of money in 3 months, you can make long-term decisions and you don't have to just say, how can we just get the money in the bank in the next 3 months? Right? So we've actually been able to, another benefit of not going down that route is that we can be thoughtful about this stuff and actually put these things in place, we're 7 people, right? So we tell people that we're 7 people and they're shocked that we're only 7 people because of the quality of stuff we're able to put out, right? And they're also shocked that we have all these processes in place, right? Well, you don't need that. You're only 7 people. You're but like the amount of stuff we can get done per person is so much higher because we have all these systems in place. It's a total efficiency game for us. So
it's amazing.
That's awesome.
So I'm hearing intentional growth and I like sing that from the rooftops when I'm talking about it. So that's some great insight. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we kind of run almost like an agency in a way because we're so, cautious about resource allocation and efficiency. Probably not to the same degree, but in more than a normal startup, I would say. Normal startup, quote unquote.
I wouldn't even call you a startup.
Right.
I almost think that's a bad word in comparison to what you're talking about. I mean, no offense to anyone who's doing a startup, but most people that are startups are going for that VC money and it's like a completely different customer. Because the customer is the VC.
Totally.
So it's really cool. And I've loved watching your journey and like, you guys have been super open about like your intentions about going after debt instead and stuff like that. Like, I think that's just amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
I mean, it's the I think that's an interesting point, that we're not a startup. Yeah, it's like we're something else. I don't know. Because startups are, tech company, small tech company or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an interesting point.
So Nelson, when you were talking about at the beginning, having to go out and find money, I want to go back to that for a second here, because we're still talking about that a little bit right now.
Yeah.
So let me first clarify. Did you have to go raise money then, just not through the VC route?
The main bulk of it was cutting expenses, right? So like, you can either cut it, like you can either increase revenue, get money from an outside source, or decrease spending.
Okay.
And most people never look at that last one. Most startups never use that last one as an option.
Yeah.
Because it's all about how, like, when you talk to a normal startup founder, if I go out and talk to a peer in Boston, the first question they ask is, how many people are you now? Because like, that is the only thing people think about. That is the measure of a successful company, because that is, if you're hiring people, that means you've raised a lot of money, right? It's usually not because you've closed a lot of customers.
Mm-hmm.
It's because you've raised a lot of money, right? And like, it's always, and the conversations are always about investors and raising money. It's never about their product or their customers. It's always about, oh yeah, can you intro me to this VC, that VC? Like, I talked to so-and-so, like, oh, we're good buds, I'll intro, it's like all about the VC network, about raising money, like the problems around raising money. It's very rare if someone's talking about, making customers happy, which is a little perverse in my mind, but
it's very insane.
The way it is.
Yeah, it seems completely backward. You guys, it's like being the anti-startup.
Right.
That's what it is.
Love it. That's even better.
That's cool. All right, cool. That answers that. Because I was thinking, like in my mind, if you're out there looking for investors or supporters or even customers, is it better to have those co-founders doing that as the face, or can you then hire somebody to be kind of your like a hired gun spokesperson? Like, is there a better way? But doing it a whole different way altogether sounds like the best decision. So
you're talking about fundraising, like having one person do the fundraising and the other person, is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
So like if you were to say that rather than cutting expenses, you were out raising money in some way, maybe not necessarily VC, but just investors.
Angels is a good example. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it better to have the co-founders do it, you and Andy, or is it better to maybe find almost like an agent? Is that even a thing? So I was kind of
it is a thing. I've heard from investors that they don't like it, which makes sense, because like, it's weird. In my opinion, what VCs are actually trying to figure out is how good you are at sales when you're pitching. They don't actually care about the business, like the fundamental nuts and bolts of the business, because it is so early. Yeah, they don't even care about that in the early stages. They don't care about numbers. But what they care about is, can this person sitting across the table from me convince me to give them hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars? And if they can, they probably can convince a customer to do the same thing. So like, they're actually testing you and your sales abilities in a lot of cases. For most people, it's not every single VC does that, but a lot in the early stages, that is what they're testing. Mm-hmm. So they're basically putting you through a gauntlet of sales. And that's why so many, it's why so many companies that are poorly run, but just have a really good sales founder raise so much money.
Sure.
It's because they're just using that founder as the decision-making criteria to assess the entire company. It also helps with recruiting, right? If you're a good salesperson, you can recruit really good people. It's a super useful skill. And like, I don't know if it's like the one thing that's going to make a difference. It's just one of many things. But
interesting. Charisma, right? That's what it's all about.
Right. It's charisma, and it's like, it's like, because entrepreneurship is crazy, right? It's like, how do you convince someone that something that does not exist is worth $1 billion? Right. That's what you're doing.
It's true. Yeah.
Think of how you have to bend the truth to make that seem obvious, right? Or how you have to distort reality to make that feel like a plausible thing, right? It's like, it's completely implausible. So it's like, if you can convince someone to put their money on the line, not to just even believe it, right? Like to get someone to believe it is one thing, but then to get them to also give you money and put it on the line based on the success of that idea, like that is insanity, right? But
it's happening.
People do it.
Doesn't mean it's right though.
No.
So cool. So so obviously you guys document processes like crazy, but let's try not necessarily to use Tettra, because that would be a navigational tool for a journey for me. But what would be like,
it is.
yeah, it is. Like probably ridiculous at a ridiculous level. I create a Tettra just about every day, a Tettra doc. But what do you use, or what do you wish you had for your journey as you started building Tettra?
What do I wish I had in the beginning?
It could be a tool, or like it could be anything. Like, what do you like looking back, hindsight, right? But what do you wish you had in the journey, or wish you had known in the journey as you're going?
I mean, not to be a dead horse, but I wish I had these insights 4 years ago when we started. It took a lot of pain to get there, right? To crystallize these thoughts that I've been sharing. I mean, I would never have been able to crystallize them without this journey. But if I could somehow put my brain inside of the 4 year ago version, we would have saved ourselves a lot of pain. But live and learn, I guess. But a tool, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, just like a tool I'm glad I had, can I skirt it by saying that? Is just, I would call it like resiliency, in that, and that means both positive and negative resiliency. So not getting too happy when things are good, not getting too down when things are bad, and just kind of keeping that even keel, which is so important, because it's the swings in emotion that kill you. It's going from closing a big customer to having a big customer churn in 8 hours, which that type of stuff happens all the time. Right. So like if you don't, you just have to keep that even keel, which I feel like me and my co-founder Andy are pretty good at, which also makes us bad at doing the fundraising, because we can't get ultra hyped about something. We're always super realistic. Well, it might not work. Like, here are the problems with it, which that doesn't do you any favors when you're trying to, again, convince someone that the thing you're building is worth $1 billion. So,
right. Yeah. I go through, I say it all the time to the team. I think they get tired of it. Like, what's the best that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? Can we survive the worst? Right. And it's similar to that resilience. Is like, I just kind of average out in the middle. Everyone's like, this is awesome. I'm like, it's okay. Yeah. Like, that's a good thing when I say it's okay. And it's almost the same answer when it's bad. Like, it's okay.
Totally. Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, and I've heard somebody say before, like, just in life in general, which kind of mirrors what you just said, Nelson, the highs aren't all your doing, and the lows aren't all your fault. Yep. So like, just live in that middle of, when things are good, enjoy, when things are bad, make them better, but just kind of live in that middle and be good. It's the swings that kill you in emotion.
Yeah.
What you said, Nelson, was awesome.
Yeah. Got to be a stoic.
Yep.
That's awesome.
If you could, that's a great insight, and that's great for you to want to have that 4 years ago. but since you can't, if you were going to be a wayfinder for somebody else and help them through all of this, what would be the first piece of advice that you would give them?
So I'll share the best piece of advice I ever got in entrepreneurship, because I would just say this to them. And it actually was from Nick Francis, who is the CEO of Help Scout, co-founder of Help Scout. And Andy and I went in to see him when we were trying to raise this money that we failed to do. We kind of ran him through the business, showed him the numbers, told him about our customers, said, we're trying to raise this money, yada, yada, yada. And his advice was, you're doing a great job, just keep going and don't give up. And like, we were like, what do you mean? Like, we're not doing great. Like, we can't raise this money. We're not. He's like, you have customers. They're paying you money. Just be patient. You're doing fine, and keep going and don't give up. Right. And that was like the most mind-blowing advice. It's almost like anti-advice, but it was like the perfect advice for that moment. And like I give that advice to almost everyone who asks for it, because a lot of the time you listen to someone, what they're going through, and a lot of the time they're doing so much right and they're doing so much good stuff. Right? Yeah. And it's like, don't worry so much about what you're not doing right, as long as you have a path to keep going, and like you're unstoppable, like basically you're profitable and can keep the company going. Like, who else do you have to, make happy besides yourself and your customers, so just keep going. Don't freak out. Like, you're going to be fine, basically.
Yeah. I actually love that. I think that's
don't freak out.
Yeah.
and at the end, and don't freak out.
Yeah.
That's great, Nelson.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So is there anything that we didn't ask you that you would want our listeners to know?
How the Red Sox are doing? Not so well.
That's all right. Neither are the Tigers, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got one to kind of tee this up. So talk to me, like, I'm starting my business today. You're big on documenting processes and everything. What and why should I start documenting when I don't need it?
Yeah, I would say it's a good question. I would say, one, to build a habit around it, because it's going to be really hard when you got 20 other things going on if you don't have a habit around doing it. And yeah, you might not need it now, but you'd be surprised that you actually do use it, even with 1 or 2 people. But even if you don't need it now, someone else down the line is going to need it. Like, there's so much stuff that I document that I just use. I look up myself because I forget what I did or why I made that decision. Right. So even just like starting out by just writing down the decisions you're making and why you're making them, even start with just like big ones, like that's one way to do it. Just like build the habit. Or I know you do this, Remington, but like a weekly kind of like captain's log type thing, where just what's on your mind, what are you happy about, what are you upset about, what, just basically stream of conscious, almost like a journal, right? Mm-hmm. Like that. I think a lot of people hear the word documentation, they think it just means like step-by-step guides and stuff like that, and that is part of it, but a lot of documentation is just sharing that type of stuff, like what's going on with you, what are you thinking about, why are you doing the things you're doing, that sort of stuff. That stuff's actually super helpful to go back and look at and be like, oh yeah, that's why we changed the title tags on the website, like
it's true.
Yeah. And that literally just happened to us 2 weeks ago. So
that's funny. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Nelson, thank you so much for being a part of Wayfinding Growth and for what you do at Tettra. Again, as you know, we use it a ton at Impulse Creative. So
that's awesome. Makes me really happy to hear that. Thanks for being customers, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll put links to Tettra in the show notes. So look for that. Hey, man, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please share it. Post it, tweet it, gram it, email a friend. Give the gift of knowledge to someone you know that could benefit from it. And if you really loved it, please consider leaving a rating and written review on your podcast player of choice. And as always, go to wayfindinggrowth.com for resources and past episodes. Remember, we're here to help you navigate your business growth with strategic conversations and insights from experts in multiple industries. Thank you for listening to Wayfinding Growth.